Cheating isn't just about sex. It's not just about temptation. It's not even about love. It's about psychology. Because when someone cheats, they don't just break a rule. They expose something deeper, a fracture in how they relate to themselves, others, and reality. Most people think cheating means you weren't enough. That's a lie, a cruel, self-destructive lie. Cheating reveals more about the cheater than the betrayed. It's not a reflection of your worth. It's a reflection of their inner chaos. So if you've ever been betrayed, here's the first truth you need to understand. You didn't cause it. You didn't deserve it. But you must understand it, or it will haunt you in every future relationship. Why people cheat. The real reasons. Let's get something straight. Not all cheaters are cold, heartless manipulators, but all cheaters are emotionally immature. And almost all of them are psychologically avoidant, because cheating is rarely about wanting more. It's about avoiding something. Guilt, insecurity, fear of intimacy, fear of being truly seen. Many cheaters chase attention because they can't stand emotional vulnerability. They want to feel desirable, not because they love themselves, but because they hate the quiet moments when they don't. Others cheat because they don't know how to handle conflict. Instead of facing tension, they escape into fantasy. Instead of resolving pain, they distract themselves with validation. This is what Carl Jung would call a shadow defense. Acting out what you can't admit to yourself. I'm not happy. I feel stuck. I'm afraid of aging. I don't know how to communicate. Rather than say these words, the unconscious acts them out. Through betrayal, through deception, through destruction. The cheater often doesn't even fully understand why they're doing it, because the real motivations are buried under years of emotional avoidance, the addictive cycle of betrayal. Here's what's even darker. Many cheaters hate themselves after they do it, but they'll do it again. Why? Because cheating becomes a cycle of shame and relief. The guilt makes them feel worthless. The attention makes them feel alive. The secrecy gives them control. The fantasy makes them forget who they are. And when it's over, they crash. They regret. They spiral. Until the next emotional high becomes too tempting again. It's not just immoral, it's addictive. This is why some people cheat on the person they still love. Because deep down, they don't feel worthy of real love. So they sabotage it before it can expose their deepest fear, that they're not enough. The psychological archetype of the cheater. Carl Jung would say, the cheater is trapped in an unintegrated persona. They present one face to the world, loyal, charming, committed. But behind that mask is an unexamined shadow. Insecure, impulsive, attention-hungry, emotionally wounded. The more they repress these traits, the more they leak out. Through lies, affairs, betrayals. The cheating isn't the root problem. It's the symptom of a deeper psychic split. And until they confront it, they will repeat it. That's why apologies don't mean change. Why regret doesn't mean growth. Why I promise I'll never do it again means nothing without deep internal work. Cheating isn't about lust. It's about a disconnection from truth, from who they really are, from what they really need, from the parts of themselves they refuse to look at. Not all cheaters are the same. Some are calculating, others are lost. Some are impulsive, others are deeply wounded. But all of them reveal something hidden, a fracture in the psyche that Jung would say has never been made conscious. Let's break them down. 1. The insecure validator. This is the person who constantly needs to feel attractive, admired, wanted. They crave attention, not because they're arrogant, but because they're fragile underneath. They flirt to feel seen. They cheat to feel alive. And once they get what they want, it's never enough. This person is usually haunted by deep insecurity. They never got the approval they needed growing up, so now they seek it through seduction. Jung would say their persona, their social mask, is built entirely on external validation. And their shadow? A terrified child who believes love must be earned through performance. 2. The emotional escapist. This type cheats not for the thrill, but for the escape. They feel trapped in their current relationship, bored, misunderstood, overwhelmed. But they don't know how to express it. So instead of communicating, they run. But here's the catch. They're not really escaping the relationship. They're escaping themselves, the guilt, the emotional responsibility, the work that real love requires. They use cheating as a release valve, not to build something better, but to avoid the discomfort of emotional confrontation. 3. The power seeker. This person doesn't cheat out of weakness, they cheat out of control. To dominate, to manipulate, to prove they can. It's not about sex, it's about power dynamics. They enjoy knowing someone wants them. They enjoy withholding truth. They enjoy watching others suffer because it affirms their own importance. This is a narcissistic pattern rooted in the wounded ego. Jung would call this an extreme shadow projection, a disowned sense of power turned dark and exploitative. They don't want intimacy, they want superiority, and they will destroy relationships just to maintain the illusion of it. 4. The trauma repeater. This cheater isn't trying to hurt anyone. They're reliving something unresolved. Maybe they watched a parent cheat, maybe they were abandoned early in life. Maybe they associate love with betrayal because that's how they were loved. So now, unconsciously, they recreate the same dynamic. They betray before they can be betrayed. They hurt before they can be hurt. They repeat the wound because it's familiar. Freud called this the repetition compulsion. Jung called it living in the grip of the unconscious. Either way, this type will keep sabotaging love until they heal the original wound. 5. The fantasy addict. This person is addicted to novelty, to the rush of being desired, to the illusion that something out there will finally make them whole. They chase excitement because they're afraid of the mundane. They confuse emotional intensity with intimacy. They might not even want a new relationship. They want the feeling, the thrill of secrecy, the intoxication of being pursued, the escape from responsibility. But when the high fades, they crash, and often cheat again to get back the feeling. This type is stuck in an endless loop of dopamine hits and emotional emptiness. 6. The silent saboteur. This one is subtle. They don't seem like the cheating type. They might seem kind, loyal, empathetic, but deep down, they're angry, resentful, disconnected. They feel like a victim in their relationship. Maybe they are, but instead of speaking up, they retaliate silently. They cheat to reclaim power, to feel like they still matter, to punish their partner for what they can't say out loud. This is passive-aggressive betrayal. They won't yell, they won't fight, but they'll destroy you quietly. And often, they'll act like you caused it. Each type looks different, but they all have one thing in common: emotional cowardice. Cheating is the act of running away while pretending to be brave, of breaking something fragile just to feel momentarily powerful. And until these inner fractures are brought to light, they will continue to repeat. Getting cheated on doesn't just break your heart, it rewires your brain. People talk about heartbreak like it's a feeling, but betrayal, that's a psychological rupture, because it doesn't just make you sad, it makes you question reality. You thought you knew this person. You trusted them with your body, your secrets, your soul. You believed their words. You built your life around those words. And then, suddenly, it was all false. That shatters something primal. The part of you that believed love was safe. The part of you that believed you could trust your instincts. The part of you that believed you were enough. Cheating triggers psychological trauma. Betrayal activates the same brain regions as physical pain, but it runs deeper than that. Because while a wound to the body heals in time, a wound to the mind lingers. It breeds obsession, rumination, replaying conversations, rechecking timelines, wondering what was real and what was performance. It can make you paranoid, detached, cold. Because once your emotional world is violated, your brain goes into defense mode. You stop trusting people. You stop trusting yourself. And that's the most dangerous part. Not that they betrayed you, but that now you're afraid your intuition can't be trusted again. The slow poison of self-blame. When you've been cheated on, you want an answer, a reason, a why that makes sense. But often, there isn't one that truly satisfies. So your mind turns on itself. Was I not attractive enough? Was I too emotional? Did I push them away? This is how betrayal breeds self-abandonment. You start to believe their failure was your fault. You stop seeing their brokenness and start believing you were the one who wasn't whole. This is the internalized lie, the invisible scar, the voice that whispers, "You weren't worth loyalty." Jung would call this the ego being fractured by trauma, a rupture in your sense of identity that can bleed into every relationship after. Post-betrayal, personality shifts. After deep betrayal, many people experience something like a psychological transformation, but not in the way you'd hope. They become avoidant, afraid to get too close or anxious, afraid to lose someone again or number, unable to feel much at all, or hyper-vigilant, reading too much into every silence, every glance, every message. What once felt safe now feels suspicious. What once felt open now feels dangerous. What once felt beautiful now feels fake. This isn't just emotional damage, it's nervous system dysregulation. It's not just that your heart is broken, your ability to regulate love has been shattered. The need to understand. Here's the dark irony. Even after being betrayed, you'll still want closure from the person who hurt you. You'll crave an explanation. You'll want them to say it wasn't your fault. You'll want them to tell you it meant nothing. You'll want them to fix what they broke, but they can't. Because if they were capable of giving you what you needed, they wouldn't have destroyed you in the first place. Your healing can't come from their guilt. It has to come from your truth. And your truth is this: you didn't deserve it. You're not broken. You're not to blame. You're not less. You're not unlovable. You were betrayed, but you are still whole. The betrayal wasn't about you. It was about what they couldn't face in themselves. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." This is the core of betrayal. Not evil, not even lust, but unconsciousness. Because most people don't cheat with a plan. They cheat with a blind spot. They act on impulses they don't fully understand. They chase feelings they never questioned. They rationalize their actions while suppressing the real motive. I just wasn't happy. It just happened. I needed to feel something again. But underneath these phrases lies something deeper. A shadow self, untouched, unclaimed, and now unleashed. What is the shadow? The shadow is Jung's term for the parts of ourselves we repress, desires we think are wrong, emotions we're ashamed of, needs we never learned to express, wounds we never healed. Most people build a persona, a mask, to be accepted. They become the good boyfriend, the loyal wife, the strong provider. But the more you cling to that mask, the more pressure builds underneath. All the resentment, all the need, all the insecurity, all the fear. And eventually, that pressure leaks out, not through words, but through actions. Cheating is often the shadow erupting through the cracks. It's the hidden self saying, "I want more. I feel trapped. I'm not who I pretend to be." The split between persona and shadow. Here's what Jung would say: the more perfect someone appears, the more unexamined their shadow probably is. Because real wholeness isn't about being flawless. It's about being honest. But cheaters live in dishonesty, not just with their partner, but with themselves. They tell themselves, "I'm a good person. I deserve this escape. It's just physical. It won't hurt anyone." But all those rationalizations are a defense. They protect the ego from confronting the truth. That part of them is still lost, still wounded, still afraid of intimacy, still terrified of being seen without the mask. And the more they run from that truth, the more likely they are to betray again. The inner child behind the affair. Beneath the shadow is something even more tender. The inner child. The child who felt unseen, unloved, unworthy, or smothered, or abandoned. This child lives in the unconscious and influences adult behavior in ways most people never notice. When that child gets triggered, they don't seek healing. They seek escape. And often, cheating becomes the coping mechanism. Why? Because the affair creates a fantasy, one where they feel desired, powerful, in control, safe. It's not the affair they're addicted to. It's the feeling they think it gives them. But here's the tragedy. It never lasts, because no one can love you enough to fix a wound you refuse to face. Self-betrayal comes first. Before someone betrays you, they've already betrayed themselves. They've betrayed their truth, their values, their higher self. They've chosen to abandon honesty for comfort, authenticity for performance, depth for distraction. And this is why cheating always leaves behind shame, even in the person who got away with it. Because the unconscious knows what you did. Even if your ego pretends otherwise, Jung warned, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. Cheating is one of those absurdities, a last-ditch attempt to fill an inner void with outer pleasure. But it never works, because the only way to end the pattern is to meet yourself fully, to face your shadow, to hold your inner child, to stop running. Let's be clear, cheating is not the end of a story, but it is the end of an illusion. Whether you were cheated on, or you were the one who betrayed, what comes next will define your future relationships, and your relationship with yourself. Because what betrayal really does is force a confrontation. Who are you now that the illusion is shattered? What do you believe in now that the mask is off? If you were betrayed, you don't need to forgive and forget. You don't need to heal quickly. You don't need to become unbreakable. You just need to come back to yourself, because betrayal is a spiritual amputation. Someone took a part of your trust and cut it away. So now your task isn't to grow it back. It's to rebuild from the inside out. That starts with one truth. You are not broken. You were wounded, yes. You were violated. You were lied to. But none of those things define you. What defines you is what you choose next. Not whether you get closure. Not whether they apologize. Not whether they regret it. But whether you refuse to let pain turn you bitter. Whether you refuse to close your heart forever. Whether you choose to trust yourself again, slowly but fully. Healing isn't about erasing the past. It's about learning to see clearly, seeing their choices for what they were, seeing yourself for who you are, and seeing the difference between the two. If you were the betrayer, this part's for the ones who cheated, who lied, who walked away from their truth. You might think the worst thing you did was hurt someone else, but the deepest wound was to yourself. Because when you betray another person, you don't just break a bond. You fracture your own identity. You become the kind of person you swore you'd never be. And that shame doesn't go away just because no one knows. So what do? You stop hiding. You stop rationalizing. You stop minimizing. You stop calling it a mistake and start calling it what it was. A choice made from fear, from cowardice, from disconnection. But that's not the end of the story. Because if you're brave enough to face the real reasons, the insecurity, the immaturity, the shadow you ignored, then something rare happens. You grow. Not in the shallow way of "I've changed," but in the painful, humbling way that only truth can bring. Jung said, "Only the wounded physician heals." If you've betrayed, you're wounded. But that wound can become wisdom if you own it. The only way out is in, whether you were the one hurt or the one who hurt. The only way to stop repeating the pattern is to go inward, to confront the parts of you that felt unworthy, to meet the fear that made you lie, to feel the ache you tried to avoid, to hold the shadow you spent years running from. Because until you do, you'll keep attracting the same pain in new disguises. Or worse, you'll keep inflicting it. You'll sabotage every good thing that comes your way. You'll chase pleasure instead of peace. You'll confuse chaos for love. But when you finally choose to see clearly, to feel everything, own everything, transform everything, you become something that betrayal can't touch. Whole. And that wholeness, that's the one thing no affair, no lie, no heartbreak can ever steal from you again. Final reflection. Cheating isn't just a relationship issue. It's a consciousness issue. It reveals where we're asleep, where we've disconnected, where we've lied to ourselves for too long. But it also points the way back to truth, back to courage, back to self-respect, back to relationships built on something real. If you've been betrayed, rise. If you've been the betrayer, redeem. Because no matter what role you played, there's one path that leads to peace: radical self-honesty, uncompromising accountability, and the courage to never repeat what once broke you.